I'm J. Jermaine Bay with a Lodium Moorish Pradium, Ante, Colorado. The acronym is AMPAC. I am the Chief Judge of Consular Court. Today is Class 39, Class 39. Before we get started with our Class 39, we want to take a moment just to thank some of the Moors that's been reaching out to AMPAC, inquiring about statehood. We've had Moors reaching out from around the world. So we want to say thank you to them for trying to come in to understanding of statehood. We humbly thank you for at least giving AMPAC an opportunity to share some of the things that we've learned and we researched and we're sharing with Moors. So keep in mind, Moors across northwest of Mexico, birthright is free. AMPAC doesn't charge to show Moors, but we've taken the time to research and learn. And the only thing we're doing now is just sharing with everyone. So keep in mind, AMPAC doesn't charge any Federal Reserve notes, no gold and silver coin, no Patreon, no cash apps. Birthright is free, all right? Keep in mind also that everything that AMPAC shares to all the Moors is already readily available on the World Wide Web for free. So AMPAC does the research, then we put it into a brief, and then we share it with other Moors. That way we can do our small part to uplift fallen humanity. So we want to say thank you to all the Moors who take the time to subscribe, and the Moors who take the time to reach out and email and call. We want to say thank you, all right? So let's go ahead and get started with the class. Today is Class 39. What did we learn from Class 38? We started learning a lot more about the ICJ, which is the Permanent World Court of the world. The ICJ can assist with what's called state disputes, all right? So as Moors start to come into statehood, Moors have to start understanding at some point we may need a referee if consular court does not prevail. What do I mean if consular court doesn't prevail? If the colonists are simply being colonists. Keep in mind what I said about the word ist, I-S-T. I-S-T, right, as a suffix means specialist. The colonists are specialists at occupying the territories of Moors all around planet Earth. Our job is to do what? Start checking the boxes through what's called politics and statehood and rejecting their colonialism, right? Decolonization. We're getting back to what's called post-millennium per consanguinity. That's the truth. How do we do that? We have to follow instructions. So today we'll keep talking about instructions. AMPAC will always qualify what we say. So today we'll keep talking about instructions. We'll talk about the instructions that the Sultan gave us. We'll talk about the instructions that international law talks about. All right? So let's go ahead and get started. Now, today is Class 39. Now keep in mind, the last time we talked about warranty deeds and the Qadi and how do you put liens on the colonists was Class 34. Class 35, we started getting into talking about AMPAC's Constitution. So today we'll keep talking about AMPAC's Constitution and explaining why we took the time to ratify a Constitution in the first place. So we'll get back to Class 34, just stick a pin in it. We'll get back to talking about that, but for right now, let's keep talking about statehood, okay? Because Moors can't enforce the Qadi if they don't have a state, all right? So let's keep talking about that, okay? So you can see we've got our Constitution up on the monitor today. As you see, Moors, especially new Moors, is coming to the site. We've got our law of restoration, which is our Constitution, and our accession to contracts and path to nationality. We'll talk about that some more today. So the reason why AMPAC is taking a pause to talk about our Constitution is that way AMPAC can be a beacon to get Moors to start studying international law, statehood, and Constitution, and that you must accede to treaties in order to enforce treaties. All right, we'll keep talking about that today, all right? Now, a lot of Moors talk about the Constitution for the United States of America. As you know, in Class 38, the last thing I said is, okay, Moors say enforce the Constitution. Okay, Article 3, Section 2 talks about what? Diversity of state, right? So we have to start being honest with ourselves, Moors. Are we just pronouncing words, or are we comprehending exactly what we're reading? How do we actually enforce the Constitution of the United States of America? This is how you enforce it. First thing you have to do is put things in proper sequential order. What's the proper sequential order? In order to enforce the Constitution of the United States of America, you need to have your own constitution, Moorish constitution. You have to have your constitution. This is AMPAC's constitution right here in real time, our constitution, right? So what's that? Here's AMPAC's constitution. The purpose of classes 35 up until now, class 39, is all about why does AMPAC have a constitution? What's this all about? The answer is AMPAC just following instructions. We'll talk about that. Here we go. Okay. So the Constitution of the United States. Well, wait, I thought they were the United States of America. That's what the front of this cover says. United States of America. But what you have to understand, Moors, is the colonists always fool you with these cover pages. But when does this Constitution really start? When you start reading the actual Constitution itself. They bait you by thinking it's the United States of America. It's not. It's the United States. Wait. So this right here is the Constitution of the United States. What's the reference point on this? Okay, let's scroll down. Because I want all Moors to do some research. You got to do research, Moors. Here's your reference point. I got this document from the Library of Congress. So the Library of Congress is saying the Constitution is about the United States, not the United States of America. That must be understood. Two separate entities. All right, so let's get into really what I want to point out to Moors. Okay. I'm going to show you a quick video, about 2 minutes, to prove to you that the United States of America no longer operates as the United States of America locally through what's called their domestic internal law. They are the United States, not the United States of America. Let's listen real quick as a refresher.
To introduce the Chief Justice of the United States, John G. Roberts, Jr., who will administer the presidential oath of office. Everyone please stand.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
That I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
What did we learn? The front of this says the Constitution of the United States of America. But they take their oath to the United States, two separate entities. So more say enforce the Constitution. Well, which Constitution? Are you enforcing the Constitution of the United States of America? Or are you enforcing the Constitution of the United States? Or should you be enforcing the Constitution of your Moorish state? We'll learn about that today. Why did I bring that up about United States? The United States, at least, is not self-appointed. Trump was not self-appointed. Trump was voted in. Everyone in Washington, D.C. is not self-appointed. They're voted in. Have Moors taken their oath? Public inauguration for their offices? There's a high probability the answer is no. So we can learn a lot from the Europeans. Moors have to learn from what Noble Drew Ali said. He's going to leave the Europeans here long enough to teach us government. So then we can run government. Have we been taking our public inaugurations, Moors? There's a high probability that the answer is no. All right. Let's get back to this Constitution. Moore saying, enforce the Constitution. Okay. Let's go down to Article 3, Section 2. Our matriarchs not here this evening. We have some inclement weather. So we're going to have our Minister of Foreign Affairs assist me today with the reading. Our Minister of Foreign Affairs is Gabandi Wasibe. As a lot of Moors will start, when you reach out to Mpac, you'll probably end up speaking to him more often than not. All right? So we have our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gabandi Wasibe. Go ahead and read Article 3, Section 2.
Section 2, 1. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority, to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party. Move to here, right. To controversies between two or more states, between a state and citizens of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign states, citizens or subjects.
All right, thank you, Minister of Foreign Affairs. So what's going on? Moore saying, enforce the Constitution, enforce the Constitution, enforce the Constitution. But are we comprehending what their Constitution says? So my question to the Moors is this. Can the Moors enforce the Constitution for the United States or the United States? Article 3, Section 2 as follows. We just finished reading it, right? Quote unquote, controversies between two or more states and foreign states. So my question to the Moors is this. How are you enforcing the Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, when you don't have a state? Or are you saying by default that you're stateless, and if you're stateless, that means you're saying enforce the Constitution because you're a citizen of the United States? Because the only way to enforce this Constitution is only two ways to enforce it, Moors. Either you're a state, diversity of state, and you're affiliated with a state because you pledge your allegiance to a state, a Moorish state, because you followed the instructions, you've checked the boxes, or because you're a citizen of the United States. I didn't say United States of America. United States because the Act of Congress, 1871, the United States of America created a government called the United States, 10 miles square, created a seal, and they're now enforcing the Constitution for the United States, not the United States of America, right? So Moors got to understand, when Mpac says, put this down, it's because the thing is this. First, we got to put things in sequential order. We will put this down and then pick this back up when? When we have our Constitution. We will do things in like manner. United States or the United States of America claim to have a Constitution, okay, then Moors need to have a Constitution. Because when you have a Constitution, now you have things in what's called like manner. Now you have what's called diversity of state. Doesn't that just simply make sense? Mm-hmm. But we also have to follow instructions. The Sultan gave instructions. International law gave instructions. So I'm going to ask the Moors several questions today about the instructions. Are we checking boxes and following the instructions? All right? Let's talk about that today. Now, as Moors know, Mpac has its Constitution, has its seal, has a flag, etc. Well, why is that? We're going to learn more about that today as Moors start coming into statehood. Mpac has acceded to certain treaties. For Moors have gone on the website and taken a look at this, let's just read it real quick so Moors can understand, why did Mpac ratify a constitution Why did Mpac turn around and accede to treaties? You know why? We were following instructions. We'll learn about the instructions today. All right, so if I can have the Minister of Foreign Affairs go ahead and read accession to contracts.
Accession contracts. The supreme law of our state is the AMPAC law of restoration, along with the treaties acceded to or which shall be entered into under the AMPAC flag and seal. A treaty is a contract, agreement, or other international accord accepted by the state parties.
Thank you, Mr. Foreign Affairs. Then we get into defining what does treaty mean. We define what accession means. We define what accede means. We define what charter means. We define what contract means, all right? Then we get into a little bit more explanation.
The contracts listed herein have been acceded to and are for your study and reference. They are the law of the state, and we are organizing the AMPAC government to be in alignment and compliance with these contracts, treaties, conventions, declarations, and the Charter of the United Nations. AMPAC has submitted accession and acceptance documents for each contract shown through the United Nations Office of Legal Affairs Treaty Section.
All right. So here, you've got each contract listed is accompanied by a link which will take you to the text of the document for your further study and reference. So as Moors can see, we've acceded to treaties. Why is that? What gave Mpac the delegation of authority orders to do what we did? And why did we do it? We kept following instructions. We're going to learn about that today. All right. Once Mpac ratified our Constitution, had our seal, flag, under the sovereignty of the Moroccan Empire, oath of allegiance, public inauguration, etc., etc., etc. We had a public inauguration, right? That's very important to understand. Then we started to accede to the treaties because we're following instructions. So then, once we did that, then we have what's called our Circle 7 State of Facts. Through our Circle 7 State of Facts, this is what we started to issue to the colonists to let them know that Mpac has recognized themselves as being a state because we're following instructions. We'll learn about that in just a moment. We started giving these specific instructions to the colonists as to how to deal with Moors in Morocco. Moors were making a competent claim. Okay? We'll learn about that. So what I want you to pay attention to is Circle 7. We're going to learn more about why Mpac came up with the basic fundamentals of what we call Circle 7 State of Facts. You'll learn more about that. Let's keep going. Why did we put together the Constitution? We were following specific instructions because we understood in order to restore Morocco, keep in mind Morocco is always there, but we have to restore it through what? Political documents with the pen. You have to make a proper claim to the competent authorities through statehood. So we recognize in order to get back to this status, we have to take it one state at a time, okay? So Mpac ratified the state because we know we want to get back to Morocco of northwestern Mexico. The only way to do that is through the political understanding of the instruments through a pen. It's all going to make sense to you in just a moment. Let's keep going. So we started one state at a time. Now, for the record, there may be other more states out there. We're just not aware of who you are. If you reach out to Mpac, we'd be more than happy to add you to the map as long as you have an organic state for the people, by the people. Organic state, okay? Why did Mpac put together a constitution? That way we can say rejection to colonialism. You just can't tell the colonists that you're Moor. You have to prove it through your material facts, the emanating document. You must start off with your constitution. The Constitution gives you the ability to have your 3 branches of government. Understand after that, now you've got statehood. You start enforcing your Constitution and you enforce this Constitution to their obligations to Article 6, Clause 2, Treaty, Supreme Law of the Land. So now, in like manner, now you're dealing with two constitutions. When you put the constitutions down, both of them, now what do you use based upon state-on-state dispute? Now you start talking about treaties, right? That's how you start to decolonize northwest of Mexico. Starts with Moorish constitutions, Moorish states, etc., etc. That's how you decolonize Moors. But Mpac was following instructions. We're going to learn more about the instructions today. So what gave Mpac the instructions? Well, first thing is our divinity. All Moors are born as Moors. That's your divinity. That's your inalienable right. After that, now you got to get back into what's called your political status. Through your constitution outlines your permanent territory, your permanent population, your government, and you start to get into now trade and relations with other states. As Moors start to now onboard more and more states, we'll get into an alliance with other Moors who are now ratifying their states, right? That's what this is all about right here. As Moors start to onboard states all over northwest of Mexico, we will create an alliance. Once we create our alliance as independent states, then we will now come together and create a national government and now establish and restore what's called one single state. That's called United States of Morocco. That must be understood. The United States of America, when they go on the international level, what they call the public law, they operate as a single state. United States of America is a single state that encompasses 50 states. But when they're on the international level, they are a single state. Okay? So now Moors will have several states within northwest of Mexico because politics is local. But we will create an alliance and come back together as one single state of Morocco. That must be understood. That's way down the road, but that's where all this is going. Moors have to start off first, one state at a time. That's not to say we have to have 50 states in order for us now to have United States of America. United States of Morocco. We will get there as we start to talk and build our alliance with other Moors and other states. Eventually we will put together that one single state called United States of Morocco. Will be one single state that helps secure the rights of our several states. Okay? All right. Now here's what I need the Moors to understand. We're talking about Constitution right now. Keep that in mind. Constitution is the proper status. And propria persona sui juris comes through the state. The title here is Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1786, ratified 1787. The key word here is ratified. These are what you call instructions. So listen, I had a Minister of Foreign Affairs. Go ahead and read this first paragraph.
The Treaty of Peace and Friendship was sealed in Morocco with the seal of the Emperor of Morocco, June 23, 1786.
Stop. Okay, Mr. Foreign Affairs, thank you very much. The Treaty of Peace and Friendship was sealed in Morocco with the seal of the Emperor of Morocco. Okay? Talking seal. Moorish state seal. Here's Mpac seal. Okay? What's happening? When Moors get into statehood, Moors will need their own seal. For decades now, what has been our seal as Moors? We've been using our thumb. We get the red ink. We put our thumbprint on all the documents, right? When Moors become the competent authority of their state, they will no longer be putting the thumbprint on a document as their private law interest. Now they start using what's called their seal. What do I mean? This is Mpac seal. It's a stamper. This is Mpac seal right here. Okay? That must be understood. This is our seal. So what happens? When Moors start to now issue their writs, affidavits, notices, orders, and judgments from consul court, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Consul General, the Qadi, etc. When we start enforcing our sovereign rights of the state, now you will need to use your seal. This is the royal seal of your state. This is the next level of our degrees, okay? So what happens? You sign a document, give you an example, purpose of example. Moors sign a document, you send it out to the colonists, etc. Now you take your stamp, your seal, you put it on a document. Now, your seal of the state, because the state secures the sovereign rights of your nationals. Now, can you put your thumbprint on there too? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But you must understand that the state, listen, your constitution secures your sovereignty. The state is now the seal. The state is now the thumbprint. This is the thumbprint of your state. That must be understood. It's next level of your degrees, Moors. So Moors won't need to keep putting thumbprints on anything. Only reason why we did that is an exercise to start understanding what sovereignty looks like. To let the colonists know that we were human beings. Okay, now when you now ratify your constitution already says you're a human being. So now your public officials, when they sign a document, they put the state seal on the document. And that is now the new thumbprint, because the state now secures your sovereignty. That must be understood. Next level of your degrees, Moors. All right, let's move on. Okay, let's get back to the reading. Okay, Minister of Foreign Affairs, if you start at the top, the treaty.
The Treaty of Peace and Friendship was sealed in Morocco with the seal of the Emperor of Morocco, June 23, 1786, in parentheses 25 Shaban, AH 1200, and delivered to Thomas Barclay, American agent, June 28, 1786, in parentheses 1 Ramadan, AH 1200, original in Arabic. The additional article was signed, move to your right, and sealed in Morocco on behalf of Morocco, July 15, 1786, 18 Ramadan, AH 1200, original in Arabic. The ship signals agreement was signed in Morocco, July 6, 1786, 9 Ramadan, AH 1200, parentheses in, original in English.
All right, continue.
Certified English translations of the treaty and of the additional article were incorporated in a document signed and sealed by the Ministers Plenipotentiary of the United States, Thomas Jefferson at Paris, January 1, 1787, and John Adams at London, January 25, 1787.
Continue.
Treaty and additional article ratified by the United States, July 18, 1787. As to the ratification, generally, see the notes. Treaty and additional article proclaimed July 18, 1787.
Okay, so what did we just learn, Morris? So right here, you're learning that the colonists did what? Certified English translation of the treaty and the additional article were incorporated in the document signed and sealed by the Ministers Plenipotentiary of the United States. What's happening? The United States of America has a seal. Do Moors have a seal through their state? Because the United States of America has a seal. AMPAC has a seal. This is the next level of our degree. We're following instructions. Sidi Muhammad expected the Ministers Plenipotentiary, thank you, brother, to have a seal, to be the competent authority to have a seal. That must be understood, Moors. Moors got to increase their level of degrees. Okay. The treaty and additional article ratified by the United States. As to the ratification, generally see the notes. treaty, an additional article proclaimed July 18, 1787. What happened? The United States of America had to bring their constitution, because according to their constitution, they brought that treaty back, and they had to, through their government, they had to ratify the treaty. Once you sign a treaty, it does not have full powers, full consent, until you bring it back and accede to it through your state. Have Moors established the states, restored the states? No. So how can we enforce a treaty if we haven't now acceded to the treaty through our state? Because the United States of America did that. They ratified it. This is their proof. They ratified the treaty. That way they can enforce the treaty. That's what Moors got to take away from what I just said. You got to do things in like manner, Moors. This is all about political chess. Things are about like manner. Moors have to follow suit because the colonists are doing things that the Moors taught them how to do. Moors got to get back into understanding government, politics, okay? Let's continue. So 1786, ratified 1787, talking about the treaty. Moors must also ratify the treaty as well. You must accede to it. That's the purpose of me showing you our website, right? Let's click on it. Right here. Accession to contracts. Okay? Why did AMPAC do that? We were following instructions. You must ratify. Okay? Let's keep learning. Okay, next treaty. The next treaty gave AMPAC its delegation authority orders, which is 1836, Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1836, which supersedes the Treaty of 1787. Okay? What did the colonists do? Okay, Mr. Foreign Affairs, if you can read this for me, please.
Peace and Friendship. Treaty sealed by the Emperor of Morocco at Mequinez, September 16, 1836, and signed for the United States October 1, 1836. Senate advice and consent to ratification January 17, 1837. Ratified by the President of the United States January 28, 1837. Entered into force January 28, 1837. Proclaimed by the President of the United States January 30, 1837. Termination in part, extraterritorial jurisdiction in Morocco relinquished by the United States October 6, 1956.
Thank you very much, Minister of Foreign Affairs. What's the point here? Moors got to start catching on to what I'm saying right now. United States of America and the United States, two separate entities, ratified the 1836 treaty. What does ratified mean? They have to bring it back to their local government through their legislation, through their state. They ratified and signed it into a bill for their state. Moors have to do the same thing. Moors just can't enforce the treaty. We must ratify the treaty by now acceding to it through our states. But Moors don't have a state. A lot of Moors are stateless. So that's the purpose of AMPAC study session, to be a beacon and start letting Moors see that even the United States of America keeps talking about ratify. What did they do? They had to consent and ratification. Moors have to follow instructions. You're going to learn later on why they have to keep doing this. As we already know, they're following instructions. Colonists are following instructions of Moors. Moors are telling them to do this. The Sultan is telling them to do this. 1836. All right, let's go on to the next treaty. Mr. Foreign Affairs, please.
Right of protection in Morocco. Convention signed at Madrid, July 3, 1880, effective from July 3, 1880. Ratifications exchanged at Tangier, May 1, 1881. Senate advice and consent to ratification, May 5, 1881. Ratified by the President of the United States, May 10, 1881. Proclaimed by the President of the United States, December 21, 1881. Ratification of the United States deposited at Tangier, March 9, 1882. Amendment, implementation, and termination in part provisions of the General Act of Algeciras of April 7, 1906 prevail over any conflicting provisions. Article 11, implemented by Article 60 of the General Act, extraterritorial jurisdiction in Morocco relinquished by the United States, October 6, 1956. Article 15, relating to Moroccan nationality, obsolete and without effect.
All right, thank you, Minister of Foreign Affairs. So, where's my point here, Morris? United States of America and the United States always has, after they sign the treaty, must bring it back through their state and do what? They must ratify.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about consent to ratification. That's why they can enforce treaties, declarations, conventions. Have the Moors done that? So let's ask ourselves some questions real quick. Are the Moors delaying their own justice?
Yes.
Next question. Are the Moors following the instructions of the Sultan and the instructions of peremptory norms of international law just cogents? We'll learn about that because that's what we're talking about right now. These are norms of international law, which is ratification of treaties. We already went over this. Can the Moors enforce the Constitution for the United States of America or the United States? Article 3, Section 2, as follows. We're learning about statehood right now. Following instructions. We're going to keep talking about these instructions. I'm going to prove something to you in just a moment. But these first two right here, that's what we're talking about right now, Moors. Are the Moors delaying their own justice, but not ratifying treaties, by not having statehood? We're going to learn about statehood, that the Sultan allowed the colonists to have states and then gave specific instructions as to what he expected them to do through their states. That's why they're ratifying. These are instructions of the Sultan. Okay, let's continue. All right, so this is the General Act of Algeciras. Okay, now here's something Moore's got to catch real fast. In 1880, okay, so you got your 1880 treaty. But you notice the colonists, these are their cliff notes, right? The colonists told you exactly what the 1906 treaty is all about. The General Act of Algeciras of April 7, 1906 prevail over any conflicting provisions. The General Act of Algeciras of April 7, 1906 prevail over any conflicting provisions. Provisions of what? The previous treaties. So you have to understand more. I'm going to prove this to you. The Act of Algeciras of 1906 prevails over the Treaty of 1786-87. It prevails over the Treaty of 1836. It prevails over the Treaty of 1880. Okay? We're going to learn why. Act of Algeciras, 1906. Be patient with me, Morris. I'm going to walk you through this. Okay, Mr. Foreign Affairs, General Act.
General Act of the International Conference at Algeciras and an additional protocol, signed at Algeciras, April 7, 1906. Ratification advised by the Senate, December 12, 1906. Ratified by the President of the United States, December 14, 1906. Ratification deposited with the Spanish government, December 31, 1906. Proclaimed January 22, 1907.
Okay, let's start right there. You see what's happening, Morris? Every time the United States of America on an international level, they bring this treaty back to their local internal states called the United States, and then they ratify it. Ratification. But who's ratifying it? The Senate, the legislators. Where's the Moorish governments? Where's the Moorish states so that we can say through our legislators we're ratifying the treaties? Have the Moors done that? If the Moors haven't done that, then we're delaying our own justice because we're not following instructions. Let's continue. Okay. So the Act of Algeciras of 1906, it doesn't necessarily supersede all the previous Moorish treaties, but it does give specific instructions that if the previous treaties do not prevail, for whatever reason, there's some type of controversy, then the Act of Algeciras 1906 shall prevail. That's what they're trying to say, okay? But all the treaties are enforced. We'll learn about that, okay? Now, let's get down into the preamble. There's something we need to learn about the preamble, okay? Let's get into the preamble. I'm going to teach you something about why the United Nations Charter has specific language and why the United States of America and the United States ratifies everything through their state. If you go back and study the United Nations General Assembly, even they have to adopt their own legislation through the United Nations General Assembly. So they come up with rights of indigenous people, guess what they have to do? They have to adopt it through the General Assembly. Everything must now come back and be ratified through your state or through your organization, okay? Let's learn something about what's called the preamble of the Act of Algeciras. We're going to learn why the United Nations writes the way they write, okay? They're learning from the Sultan. Who's the Sultan represent? The Moors. You have to understand something about the Sultan, especially 1906. The Sultans are acting as the administrative clerks over the Moorish Empire. That must be understood. Because at this time, they're the Arabs. They're still our brothers and sisters, nonetheless. But the Moors have been colonized by the Romans. The Moors have been colonized by the Arabs, the Ottomans, etc. There's been a lot of intermixing going on. That's why if you go back and do any study and research based upon what they call the Berbers, the Mazai people, you'll learn there are two separate nations in what's called the Kingdom of Morocco and across Africa, especially North Africa. Okay? The indigenous people are making claims everywhere, all over the world. Okay? All right, let's get into this preamble. What is the purpose of why we're going over this? Because AMPAC ratified a constitution. And we're now trying to be a beacon to show the Moors, the only thing AMPAC did was follow the instructions. We have the audacity and the competency and the courage to simply just move forward and start checking boxes. It's that easy. AMPAC is not special. The only difference between us and any other Moor is that maybe we studied before you got to it, or maybe you was aware of it and you just haven't checked the boxes and moved forward. So therefore, AMPAC is just trying to be an inspiration for other Moors to understand we got to get back to statehood because it was the instructions and orders from the Sultan, and now the United Nations Charter is following those same instructions of the Sultan. I'll prove that to you. Okay, Mr. Foreign Affairs, if you can read the preamble of the Act of Algeciras 1906.
Inspired by the interest attaching itself to the reign of order, peace, and prosperity in Morocco, and recognizing that the attainment thereof can only be effected by means of the introduction of reforms based upon the triple principle of the sovereignty and independence of His Majesty the Sultan, the integrity of his domains, and economic liberty without any inequality, have resolved upon the invitation of His Sharifian Majesty to call together a conference at Algeciras for the purpose of arriving at an understanding upon the said reforms, as well as examining the means for obtaining the resources necessary for their application, and have appointed as their delegates plenipotentiary the following.
Okay, let's go back and get a basic understanding. It's self-explanatory, but let's just go back real quick. You're going to see some of this similar language in the charters, in the declarations. You're going to see ratification quite often, etc. Okay? All right, boys, here we go. Inspired by the interest attaching itself to the reign of order. So all the Christian nations are attaching themselves to the reign of order of Morocco. Peace and prosperity in Morocco, and recognizing, you see that a lot in the declarations. Recognizing. Recognizing. That's why the United Nations Charter talks about recognizing. The declarations talk about recognizing all the time. They're getting these words from the Sultan. That the attainment thereof can only be effected by means of the introduction of reforms based upon the triple principle of the sovereignty and independence of His Majesty, the Sultan, the integrity of his domains, and economic liberty. You notice you always see this word economics. Economics, economics, economic liberty, economics, economics, economic liberty. You'll see that a lot in declarations. We'll learn about that. Without any inequality. You always see in the declaration that word equality. Equality. You gotta understand, the United Nations Charter is doing nothing but following instructions of the Sultan. Have resolved upon the invitation of His Sharifian Majesty to call together a conference at Algeciras for the purpose of arriving at an understanding upon the said reforms, as well as examining the means for obtaining the resources necessary for their application. Necessary for their application. What's necessary for the application? What application? You're talking constitutions, you're talking treaties, you're talking conventions, all the applications that bring all the powers together. But he's telling them they got to bring their applications together along with the Sultan. That means both parties are working on trying to maintain what's called equality. All right? So the applications are very important. That's the emanating instruments, emanating documents. And I've appointed as their delegates plenipotentiary the following. Okay? So that's the preamble. But the preamble continues on. Okay? Let's learn a little bit more. I'm pointing out these words to you for a reason more. Ratification, economic liberty. Okay? We have to learn about these words. Okay? Applications. Let's skip on down. It's all going to make sense to you, Morris. All right. Minister of Foreign Affairs, you can continue to read from here. This is still a part of the preamble.
Who furnished with full powers, which were found in good and due form, have in conformity with the program upon which His Sharifian Majesty and the powers have agreed, successively discussed and adopted.
Stop. Okay. So all the signatory powers, including the Sultan, he's reigning in the order. Everybody has to follow the instructions of the Sultan. And he says what? Who furnished with full powers. Who furnished? All the signatory powers that came to the table were the competent authority because they had what's called states. They were full powers because they were the elected officials of their states. They had full powers to even come and talk to the Sultan. That means the Moors also have to have full powers. Moors have to do things in what's called like manner. This is like manner. So Moors have to have full powers because the Sultan had full powers. The colonists had full powers. And the Moors in northwest of Mexico have been colonized, and now we have to come back into full powers. We can't take no shortcuts. We have to get back to statehood, to ratify the treaties, conventions, and declarations through the state, because that's what the Sultan is talking about right here. Listen to what he says. Who furnished with full powers, which were found in good and due form, have in conformity with the program upon which His Sharifian Majesty and the powers have agreed, successively discussed, and adopted. They adopted the treaties. You must adopt it. You must accede to it. You must accept it. It must be a ratification of it. You got to take it back to your local state and now ratify it through your state. That's what Moors have to do. Have we done that? That's a high probability that the answer is no. Let's continue. For those Moors who are new to the channel, I'm going to show you a little bit more about the Act of Algeciras, and I'm going to get over to the applicable articles that I really want to show. So Moors that are new to AMPAC, I'm going to show you real quick that the Act of Algeciras is really about the Moors, okay? Let's see here. All right. So if I can have the Minister of Foreign Affairs read sections 1 and 2.
1. A declaration relative to the organization of the police. 2. A regulation concerning the detection and repression of the contraband of arms. 3. An act of concession for a Moroccan state bank.
All right. So you're talking about Moroccan state banks. It's about Moroccans, right? All right. Just a moment. This is the article I really want to show the more Article 2. All right. Continue, Mr.
Article 2. The police shall be under the sovereign authority of His Majesty the Sultan. It shall be recruited by the Maghzen from Moorish Mohammedans, commanded by Moorish Cades, and distributed in the 8 ports open to commerce.
Okay. So the new Moors that are coming across Ampac's study session, the Act of Algeciras is about 3 people: the Sultan, the Moors, and the foreigners. That must be understood. That's why I wanted to show the Moors. Article 2, who don't know anything about the Act of Algeciras, is about Moors, the Sultan, and the Christian powers. Okay? So as you can see, it's about the Moorish Mohammedans, commanded by the Moorish Cades, and distributed into the 8 ports open to commerce. So it's about Moors. Act of Algeciras is about Moors. Okay? Now, let's get over to the main article I want to show you. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The Act of Algeciras only has 7 chapters. We're getting ready to get to what's called the general provisions, which is the instructions that the Sultan gave all the signatory powers, including the Moors. These are specific instructions. But why am I pointing out Article 7? Listen, Moors. Circle 7, state of facts. We're going to learn why Mpac is talking about the basic fundamentals of the state of facts. Circle 7, state of facts, because we're just basically following instructions. All right? Let's learn about the Circle 7, state of facts. Okay, so Chapter 7. Okay, Mr. Foreign Affairs, please.
Chapter 7. General provisions. Article 120. With a view to harmonizing its legislation, if the occasion arises, with the engagements contracted under the President General Act, each of the signatory powers engages to take the necessary steps leading to the enactment of such legislation as may be necessary so far as it is concerned.
Okay. What should we take away from this? 120, right? Listen, Moors, these are the instructions that Mpac followed. These are instructions that all Moors around planet Earth have to follow. Listen. Article 120. With a view to harmonizing its legislation. What do they mean harmonizing? Bringing it together. You got to take that treaty and bring it back to your state. Harmonizing it means you're coming together, you're reigning into order. With a view to harmonizing its legislation, if the occasion arises with the engagements contracted under the present General Act, listen, each of the signatory powers engages to take the necessary steps leading to the enactment of such legislation, listen, such legislation as may be necessary so far as it concerns. What's happening? The Sultan is telling them, go back to your local domestic state, sign it through your legislation so it becomes the law of your land. Those are the orders. So what did Mpac do? We acceded to treaties because that's what the Sultan said to do. These are the specific instructions. The Act of Algeciras prevails over all the Moroccan treaties when there's a dispute, and therefore you can't now be able to effectively talk about the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1787, 1836, 1880. If you still have a dispute, can't come to an understanding, the 1906 Act of Algeciras supersedes all of them, so you can use all 4. Use all 4 Moors. 1787, 1836, 1880, 1906. Use all 4, but the 1906 supersedes all of them. We'll learn more about that. But the Sultan said you got to go back now through what? Whatever you got to do for each of the signatory powers engaged in to take the necessary steps leading to the enactment of such legislation as may be necessary so far as it's concerned. They go back and ratify. That's all the colonists been doing is following instructions. That's all the United Nations Charter tells Moors to do is follow instructions. Article 121. Okay, Mr. Foreign Affairs.
Article 121. The present General Act shall be ratified according to the constitutional laws of each state. The ratifications shall be deposited at Madrid as soon as practicable, and at the latest by December 31st, 1906. A procès verbal shall be made of such deposit and a certified copy sent to each of the signatory powers through the diplomatic channel.
Okay, what did we just learn? Listen more. These are more instructions. I started off this video, this class, I'm going to talk about instructions. The Sultan gave the colonists instructions. The Sultan said, you got to go back and ratify these treaties. That's why the Charter of the United Nations says you must ratify. We're going to talk some more about that today. Article 121. The present General Act shall be ratified according to the constitutional laws of each state. So Moors need constitutional laws of each state. So you can go back and ratify the treaty through your state. Matriarchal Council. Let's start all over. Article 121. Instructions for all Moors, for both indigenous people and colonists. The present General Act shall be ratified according to the constitutional laws of each state. Have Moors done that? Let's read up here. Are the Moors delaying their own justice? Yes, if we have not, and we don't have constitutional laws, and we don't have a state, because we can't ratify the treaty in order to enforce it. And the Sultan said what? Watch this. Are the Moors following the instructions of the Sultan and the instructions of the peremptory norms of international law just cogence? We're going to learn more about the peremptory norms of just cogence. All right? Thank you, Mr. Foreign Affairs. We're going to learn more about this, okay? Now keep in mind, Moors at home, AMPAC is not here to challenge what you've been doing. Everything we've been doing has been an excellent exercise leading up to this point. Noble Drew Ali had to bring us back to ground zero. We suffer from animal husbandry, indoctrination, right? Cognitive dissonance. Noble Drew Ali got us back to ground zero. Taj Bey came in and took it from there to share more law and history with us, to start building a more solidified foundation. That way it woke up more Moors because of the internet. The public internet came out in 1991. Because of that, it was able to give good brother Taj Bey and other Moors an opportunity to share this information with us that had been withheld from us. Taj Bey has done an excellent job of helping fallen humanity. But as Taj Bey tell you, everything he's done has been about a mental exercise to get us up to the next level of our degrees. Now it's time for all the Moors collectively who've been listening to Taj Bey and been studying Noble Drew Ali to understand now we got to get back to these well-settled principles of the treaties. And the treaties give us specific instructions that we must ratify it through a constitution and state. That's what's happening right here. Listen, let's read it again. Article 121. The present General Act shall be ratified according to the constitutional laws of each state. This is 1906. The ratification shall be deposited at Madrid as soon as practicable, and at the latest by December 31st, 1906. So listen, Moors. Once you accede to these treaties through your state, according to the instructions, you're supposed to do what now? You have to deposit Deposited to who? It says at Madrid, but you know who's replaced in Madrid now? The United Nations. United Nations Secretary General. You deposit your domestic internal law that you've acceded to through your state. You deposit now with the Secretary General, Secretariat, etc. We're going to learn more about that today. I'm trying to show more of the step-by-step instructions. We're going to keep talking about this. All right? Be patient with me, Moors. A process verbal shall be made of such deposit to have the Moors, once they acceded to the treaties through their state, that they then now deposit the treaties with United Nations, Secretary General. Have we done that, Moors? Or are the Moors delaying their own justice? Because until you deposit it through your state, ratified and then deposit with the United Nations, you can't enforce the treaty. Those are the instructions. This was the Sultan talking about. If you haven't given that, show me proof. This is the Sultan now saying, prove that you ratified it through your state. Send it back. I need to see a certified copy that has been ratified. Listen, Moors. A process verbal shall be made of such deposit and a certified copy sent to each of the signatory powers through the diplomatic channel. So the Sultan's telling all the signatories, I'm going to send y'all a copy that the other states have ratified it through their government. Sultan is holding on to these documents. You'll learn in a little while who else is holding on to it as well. But AMPAC was following specific instructions of the Sultan and of the treaties. Why? Because the treaty is a supreme law of the land. Moors got to follow instructions. There are no shortcuts. Let's go on to Article 122.
Article 122. The present General Act shall enter into effect as soon as all the ratifications shall have been deposited, and at the latest on December 31st, 1906, in case the special legislative measures which may be necessary in certain countries to ensure the application to their nationals living in Morocco of certain stipulations of this present General Act shall not have been enacted by the date fixed for ratification, these stipulations shall only become applicable in respect to them after the legislative measures above referred to shall have been promulgated.
Did you hear that, Moors? Let's read it again. Sultan's telling them, if you haven't ratified it through your state, then you can't enforce this treaty. Listen, this is the Moors got to understand. These are specific instructions that Moors have to follow as well. Article 122. The present General Act shall enter into effect as soon as all the ratifications shall have been deposited. See, first you got to deposit it before it even come into effect. But where do you deposit it first? First you must accede to it. You must accept it. You must ratify it through your state and then show proof thereof that you did it. You got to send it now to United Nations Secretary General as proof. What were they doing back then in 1906? They were sending it to the Sultan. Now, because of the United Nations Charter of 1945, where do you send it now? To United Nations Secretary General. That's what Moors got to understand. We have to follow instructions. Listen. And at the latest on December 31st, 1906, what did the Sultan do? Gave him a deadline. You go back and you sign it. You signed it, go back and ratify it through your state. You got a deadline because I'm not playing with you. Moors got to understand that. Moors also have to put a deadline on themselves. It's been a mental exercise, but now Moors need to get serious about statehood because Moors got pain. Moors want to fix this by any means necessary. Okay, if Moors are serious about fixing it, let's put a deadline on ourselves. What do I mean? Start checking the boxes in a timely manner. Let's get back into statehood because these are the instructions of the Sultan. Let's continue. In case the special legislative measures which may be necessary in certain countries. You hear that? Let's use the United States of America as an example. Certain countries, he's talking about certain countries, let's use them as an example. In case the special legislative measures which may be necessary in certain countries to ensure the application to their nationals living in Morocco. United States of America has their nationals of the United States living in Morocco of certain stipulations of this present General Act shall not have been enacted by the date fixed for ratification. Now he's going to tell them what's happening. If the United States don't go back and ratify it, here's what's going to happen. Let's start right here. Morocco, of certain stipulations of this present General Act shall not have been enacted by the date fixed for ratification. Now, these stipulations shall only become applicable in respect to them after the legislative measures above referred to shall have been promulgated. See, the Sultan wasn't playing around. He told those signatory powers, I know y'all here to sign the treaty. When you get back to your state, you better ratify it and send me a certified copy that you've done so. And if you haven't done so, then you can't enforce it. You see what's happening? Moors have to follow these same instructions. Mpac is not special. All we did is follow the instructions. We have the audacity, the competency, and we have the energy to move forward and follow through with specific instructions. Okay, let's get to Article 123.
Article 23, and last, all treaties, conventions, and arrangements of the signatory powers with Morocco remain in force. It is understood, however, that in case of conflict between their provisions and those of the present General Act, the stipulations of the latter shall prevail. In faith whereof the delegates plenipotentiary have signed the present General Act and have affixed their seals thereto, done at Algeciras, the 7th day of April, 1906, in a single copy which shall remain deposited in the archives of the government of His Catholic Majesty, and of which certified copies shall be transmitted through the diplomatic channel to the signatory powers.
All right. Thank you, Minister of Foreign Affairs. All right. So what's happening? These are specific instructions that Mpac follow. These are specific instructions that all Moors will have to follow if they want their sovereignty back. Moors want their e-state, you want their state back, you want the empire back. This is what you have to do. You have to follow instructions. You need a state constitution and then ratify the treaties through your state in order to enforce it. Then after that, you have to deposit what you've done through your ratifications with the United Nations Charter Secretary General. These are instructions. Listen. Article 123. And last, all treaties, conventions, and arrangements of the signatory powers with Morocco remain in force. So all the treaties, Treaty of 1787, Treaty of 1836, Treaty of 1880, and 1906 all remain in force. However, listen, it is understood, however, that in case of conflict between their provisions, what provisions? All the treaties that are in force. This is why I was pointing out to you in the 1880 Treaty of Madrid, that the United States of America pointed out to themselves when there's a conflict that the Act of Algeciras will prevail. See, they know this already. Listen, it is understood, however, that in any case of conflict between their provisions and those of the present General Act, the stipulations of the latter shall prevail. What's the latter? The latter is what? The General Act of Algeciras. The latter, the last thing signed by the Christian powers was the 1906 Act of Algeciras. It supersedes all the other prior Moroccan treaties. However, all the treaties are in force. That's 4 treaties that the Moors can enforce. 1787, 1836, 1880, 1906. But if there's a conflict about the first 1, 2, 3 treaties, 1887, 1787, 1836, 1880, then the 1906 treaty will prevail over these. That's a very powerful combination, Moors. Moors must study the Act of Algeciras 1906. It's a very powerful obligations on both the colonists and on Moors. Moors have to follow instructions. Mpac followed instructions. We check the boxes in order for us to now have what's called full powers. Now let's talk about this. Charter of the United Nations. The Charter of the United Nations, now we're about to get into what? First we started talking about are the Moors following the instructions of the Sultan. We just read the instructions of the Sultan. And the instructions of the peremptory norms of international law just cogence. Now we're about to read the norms of just cogence, which is the principles of international law. Now we're going to find out why the charter talks the way it talks, because the charter simply followed the instructions of the Sultan. Keeping in mind, Moors, Sidi Muhammad allowed the colonists to have what you call states. The colonists are not operating through states by unilateral decision. They're operating through statehood because the Sultan gave them permission to have states. That must be understood. All right, let's get into this preamble, show you a couple things. I know sometimes the text can be difficult to read. Okay, let's quickly read the preamble. It's going to make a little bit more sense to you. Okay, Mr. Foreign Affairs, let's go.
We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom.
Continue.
And for these ends, to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbors, and to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security, and to ensure by the acceptance of principles and the institution of methods that armed force shall not be used save in the common interest, and to employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples.
Stop. So you see now this word economic and social advancement. Economic and social advancement. What do we learn about that? That's 1906, right? Let's go back up to the preamble. Let's go back up to the preamble. All right. There we are. We're in the preamble right now, right? This is the preamble of the 1906 Act of Algeciras. Okay? Right here. Let's read it real quick. Inspired by the interest attaching itself to the reign of order, peace, and prosperity. So the United Nations Charter keeps talking about peace, doesn't it? Where do you think they got that word from? 1906 Act of Algeciras, because they're following the instructions of the treaties of the Sultan, i.e. the Moors, Moroccan law. Let's continue. And prosperity in Morocco. And recognizing, right? United Nations love this word, recognizing that the attainment thereof can only be effected by means of the introduction of reforms based upon the triple principle of the sovereignty and the independence of His Majesty the Sultan, the integrity of his domains, and the economic liberty. Economic, you see? So what is the United Nations Charter doing? Repeating what the Act of Algeciras is talking about. Right here. Economic and social advancements of all peoples. United Nations Charter is following the instructions of the Sultan. Okay, brother. Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims. Accordingly, our respective governments, through representatives assembled in the city of San Francisco, who have exhibited their full powers found to be in good and due form, have agreed to present to the present charter of the United Nations and do hereby establish an international organization to be known as the United Nations.
So the United Nations has taken over for what's called Madrid. Madrid was the place where all the signatory powers have to send their documentation as well as over to the Catholic Majesty, right? The Catholic Majesty represented the Christians. Madrid represented who? The Mohammedans, the Moors. You gotta understand that, okay? So what are we talking about here? Once again, we're using the word what? Full powers. Full powers found. Where are you finding that? That's in the Act of Algeciras, right?
Right.
Let me slow down a little bit. Okay, so in the preamble, okay, we scroll on down, scroll on down, scroll on down. Okay. Who furnished with full powers. Full powers. Full powers. So the United Nations Charter is talking about full powers. Where United Nations Charter get that word from? Act of Algeciras, 1906. Full powers. You see what's happening, Morris? The United Nations Charter is following suit of instructions from the Sultan. Okay. Now, let's go down to Article 73. We could read Articles 1 and 2. It talks about statehood, but let's jump down to Article 73. That's a little bit more germane to the subject for tonight. Okay, Article 73, the Preamble.
Chapter 11, Declaration regarding non-self-governing territories, Article 73. Members of the United Nations which have or assume responsibilities for the administration of territories whose peoples have not yet attained a full measure of self-government recognize the principle that the interests of the inhabitants of these territories are paramount and accept as a sacred trust the obligation to promote the utmost within the system of international peace and security established by the present charter the well-being of the inhabitants of these territories, and to this end, A, to ensure with due respect for the culture of the peoples concerned, their political, economic, social, and educational advancement, their just treatment, and their protection against abuses.
Okay, let's stop right there. So what are we talking about again? Economic, social, education, advancement for the people. But this preamble is really talking about what? Let's go back. Article 73. Members of the United Nations which have or assume responsibilities for the administration of territories whose people have not yet attained a full measure of self-government recognize the principle that the interests of the inhabitants of these territories are paramount. Who are they talking about? Moors. Because of what? The treaties is paramount. Why? We'll learn in a minute. And accept as a sacred trust the obligations to promote to the utmost within the system of international peace and security established by the present charter, the well-being of the inhabitants of these territories, and to this end. Why are they talking like that? Because of the preamble of the Act of Algeciras. Now, we've already read this part of the preamble. Let's scroll back up. You're going to get an understanding. Show you why AMPAC ratified its constitution, started following instructions. Preamble, 1906 Act of Algeciras. Inspired by the interest attaching itself to the reign of order. So the colonists know they have an obligation to Morocco and the Moors to reign in an order of peace and prosperity in Morocco, and recognizing that the attainment and therefore can only be effected by means of the introduction of reforms. Article 73 is talking about reforms to help the Moors who are not self-governing yet, but yet coming back in different stages of advancement. Why is the charter written that way? Because they got obligations to this treaty. Let's start right here. And recognizing that the attainment thereof can only be effected by means of the introduction of reforms based upon the triple principle of the sovereignty and independence of His Majesty, the Sultan, the integrity of his domains. The integrity of his domains. Domains of what? Morocco. So the United Nations Charter is trying to maintain the integrity of Morocco because they all got obligations to these treaties. And economic liberty without any inequality. You see, the United Nations Charter is trying to maintain equality because they know they cannot maintain inequality. You got to understand what Article 73 is talking about. Have resolved. So it's been resolved. It's a settled matter. They agreed already to this treaty. So now you go back, 1945. So you get into the subsections to tell the colonists and the Moors, the indigenous people, how to get back to equality. For both the indigenous people and the colonists got to get back to equality. Listen. Section 8, to ensure with due respect for the culture and the peoples concerned, their political, that's statehood, because we can't get back to states. Listen, Moors, if the Moors cannot get back to statehood through their constitutional law, then we cannot get back equality. That must be understood, Moors. So the colonists know they can't get in the way of Moors getting back into statehood, because that's the only way we can get equality. You got to understand what's happening right now. If they prevent Moors from having their own political autonomous government, then that's not equality. That's inequality. And it's forbidden in the Act of Algeciras. You got to understand what's happening. Start from here. To ensure with respect for the culture of the peoples concerned, their political, economic, social, and educational advancement, their just treatment, and their protection against abuses. Because they have to maintain equality because of the Act of Algeciras, 1906. Let's keep reading. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Section B.
B, to develop self-government, to take due account of the political aspirations of the peoples, and to assist them in the progressive development of their free political institutions, according to the particular circumstances of each territory and its peoples, and their varying stages of advancement.
Thank you, Minister of Foreign Affairs. What's happening? After Algeciras, the Sultan was reigning in the order. Why? Because the Sultan had lost control. So he's reigning in the order, putting together applications, and forcing the Christians to get back into a reign of order by ratifying the treaty through their states. And these are the same instructions Moors got to follow. That's why the United Nations Charter is very important. When you read now the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, Article 1 tells you immediately go back, follow the yellow brick road back to this charter, and keep going back further. You get to treaties like this, 1906. What's happening? Section B, to develop self-government, that's the Moors' responsibility. to develop self-government, but we must be the competent authority to understand statehood, to take due account of the political aspiration. Political means state. Aspiration of the peoples and assist them in the progressive development of their free political institutions. That's your state and all the organs of your state, such as the Qadi, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Consul General, Consular Court, Executive Branch, Legislative Branch, and all the other organs of your state's government, according to the particular circumstances of each territory. So what's this each territory is about? You know what's happening? Each territory, listen. Listen, Morris. Listen. Each territory, listen. Each territory. The United States, there are several states. All of their states are claiming a permanent latitude through their constitution. Every state has a constitution. They're claiming a permanent territory, what they call a territorial state under occupation. Go do the research called territorial state under occupation. Research that. So these are the different territories. Then now Moors have to now say rejection to the territorial claim of occupation, which is called decolonization. So it's the Moors' obligation to follow instructions to deal with each territory. Each territory. Let's read it again. Let's start from the top. To develop self-government, to take due account of the political aspirations of the peoples, and to assist them, they're supposed to assist us, in the progressive development of their free political institutions according to the particular circumstances, listen, of each territory. Each territory. Each territory. If Moors have political aspirations, each territory, we have a right to make a proper claim of statehood. Each territory, all around northwest of Mexico and all around the globe, anywhere there's crust, i.e. land, Moors can make a claim to statehood of each territory. Okay. Let's move past this. Let's move on. I'm going to give them some more instructions. Listen, Moors, listen. This right here is the Vienna Convention of 1969. I refer to it quite often, and so does the international community. Why? Because it governs the law of treaties all around the world. This is the pivotal point where all nations and countries around planet Earth agree to have what they call statehood status. It's a pivotal moment in world politics. Mr. Foreign Affairs, you can read Section 8. This is Article 2, use of terms. Article 2, go ahead, Mr. Foreign Affairs.
Article 2, use of terms. 1. For the purposes of the present convention, A. Treaty means an international agreement concluded between states in written form and governed by international law, whether embodied in a single instrument or in two or more related instruments, and whatever its particular designation.
Okay, so the treaty means what? Treaty means an international agreement concluded between states. Act Algeciras 1906 was what? A treaty concluded between states. So if Moors now want to be a part of those treaties, we must now, through our state, we must accede to them, because the treaties are only amongst states. My question to the Moors is this: if we don't have states, then are the Moors delaying their own justice? Are the Moors following the instructions of the Sultan and the instructions of peremptory norms of international law, just cogent? We're talking about that now. Are we doing that? Are we checking the boxes more? Listen to section B. This is the instructions of the Sultan of the Act of Algeciras, 1906. Listen, section B.
B, in quotes, ratification, quotes, acceptance, quotes, approval, and quotes, accession, mean in each case the international act so named whereby a state establishes on the international plane its consent to be bound by a treaty.
Stop. Thank you, brother. Moors. What did the Sultan? So you got to understand what's happening. Ratification, acceptance, approval, and accession means in each case the international act is so named whereby a state establishes on the international plane its consent to be bound by a treaty. Those are instructions. What's the international plane? That's the UN. And the state must be bound to the treaty first. Then you go to UN and deposit it with the Secretary General and the Secretary. Are Moors following the instructions? If the answer is no, then we can't enforce the Constitution. We can't enforce treaties. We can't enforce declarations. We can't enforce conventions. Let's continue. Where did the United Nations get these words? They got it from the 1906 Act of Algeciras. Let's go back. Let's scroll on down. Scrolling down. We're going to chapter 7, circle 7, state of facts, tells you the obligation of the Moors. The obligation, chapter 7, circle 7, circle 7, state of facts. What are state of facts? You have to do all these things and check the boxes. Why? Because that's the instructions of the Sultan, Act of Algeciras, 1906. Listen. So therefore, we already read Article 120 is an act. You got to go back and ratify it. Article 121. Go ahead. I'll read it. I'll read it, Mr. Foreign Affairs. Thank you. Article 121. The present general act shall be ratified according to the constitutional laws of each state. Okay. Let's go back, Moors. Let's learn something today. Why is the United Nations saying of the Vienna Convention of 1969 that governs all treaties, ratification? Where did they get this from? The orders of the Sultan. Mpac just following instructions. So my question to the Moors is this. Are the Moors delaying their own justice by not getting back to statehood? Are the Moors delaying their own justice because they're what? Not following the instructions of the Sultan, i.e. the treaties. And are the Moors following the instructions of what? International law. If the answer is no, that means we're stateless. If the answer is no, if you can't answer these questions, that means we're not following the instructions. That means what, ultimately? The Moors are delaying their own justice. And Moors got pain. Moors want to fix this. Okay, Moors, you want to fix it? Here's what you do. Put this Constitution down, ratify your Constitution, get back into statehood, accede to the treaties, deposit the treaties with the United Nations Charter, Secretary General, and the Secretariat. I'm going to give you some more instructions. Here we go. 2010. United Nations is still talking to us. Listen. This is the rights of indigenous people. Listen, why am I going through this? I'm trying to tell the Moors, why did AMPAC do what we did? We were only following instructions, and now we're trying to be a beacon and share this information with all Moors. Listen. This is the rights of indigenous people, year 2007, giving Moors specific instructions about ratifying states and ratifying accessions to treaties. Listen, you gotta listen to it very carefully. Article 4, Mr. Foreign Affairs.
Article 4. Indigenous peoples in exercising their right to self-determination,
Stop. Where we learn self-determination, the charter. Continue.
have the right to autonomy or self-government in matters relating to their internal and local affairs, as well as ways and means for financing their autonomous functions.
So your autonomous functions mean your autonomous state rights. The jurisdiction is about your state rights. You can't have a state without a Moorish constitution. Continue, Article 5.
Article 5, indigenous peoples have the right to maintain and strengthen their distinct political, legal, economic, social, and cultural institutions, while retaining their right to participate fully, if they so choose, in the political, economic, social, and cultural life of the state.
So the instructions are clear. Moors want their economic sovereignty back. You want to enforce treaties and get back into trade. And we need what? State. Instructions are clear. Now watch this, Moors. Let's go to Articles 41 and 46, okay? Listen, I'm taking the Moors through a step-by-step instructions of why AMPAC did what they did with their constitution. Okay, let's get down here. Article 41. Moors got to learn how to read. Let's go. Article 41 is going to tell you something about Moors. You got to ask yourself the question, are you listening, Moors? Are you reading and comprehending, or are you just pronouncing words? Okay, Mr. Foreign Affairs, Article 41.
Article 41, the organs and specialized agencies of the United Nations system and other intergovernmental organizations shall contribute to the full realization of the provisions of this declaration through the mobilization, inter alia, of financial cooperation and technical assistance. Ways and means of ensuring participation of indigenous peoples on issues affecting them shall be established.
Okay, what's happening? Article 41, listen, Moors. The organs and specialized agencies of the United Nations system and other intergovernmental organizations shall contribute to the full realization of the provisions of this declaration through the mobilization, inter alia, of financial cooperation and technical assistance. Ways and means of ensuring participation of indigenous people on issues affecting them shall be established. What's happening? The obligations, the United Nations have an obligation is to protect and secure the rights of indigenous people, i.e. Moors. So through their applications and their provisions of the declarations, they've been trying to wake the Moors up. Several declarations have come out to protect the Moors. Moors haven't been reading this and comprehending that we need a statehood. We'll keep talking about this. Let's get down to Article 46. Article 46 is the last article of the rights of indigenous people. Mr. Foreign Affairs.
Article 46, 1. Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, people, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act contrary to the Charter of the United Nations, or construed as authorizing or encouraging any action which would dismember or impair totally or in part the territorial integrity or political unity of sovereign and independent states.
So the rights of indigenous people, Article 46, Section 1, is talking about the sovereignty and the independence of states for who? Indigenous people. You got to see what's happening in this last article. They're bringing it full circle, talking about statehood and the responsibility of colonial states and the responsibility of the charter. Okay? Let's go on. Section 2.
2. In the exercise of the rights enunciated in the present declaration, human rights and fundamental freedoms of all shall be respected. The exercise of the rights set forth in this declaration shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law and in accordance with international human rights obligations. Any such limitations shall be non-discriminatory and strictly necessary solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others, and for meeting the just and most compelling requirements of a democratic society.
You see that, Moors? So Moors want to secure their rights. They need due recognition. What's the due recognition? You have to recognize yourself as a state in order for other states to recognize you, but they can never recognize Moors until Moors come back into statehood. And then the Moors after that have to now accede through ratification of the treaties in order to enforce them. In addition to that, then we have to deposit the treaties with the United Nations Charter. Because the United Nations Charter has an obligation to secure the rights of Moors because of the Act of Algeciras 1906 and the previous treaties. Section 3.
3. The provisions set forth in this declaration shall be interpreted in accordance with the principles of justice, democracy, respect for human rights, equality, non-discrimination, good governance, and good faith.
All right. So you see right here, Moors, democratic society. What are they saying about that in the Rights of Indigenous People, Section 2? You can't be self-appointed. Democratic, not democracy. Democratic means by vote, election, for the people, by the people. That means no more monarchies. That means no more sultans. That means no more emperors, no more empresses, no more kings, no more queens. What does that mean? Everything is about state rights. Now, if your state now wants to give titles of empress and sultan, that's totally up to your state rights through your constitution. If your constitution says people have specific titles that say sultan and empress and emperor, that's fine. But you can't be self-appointed. You must use democratic society, the vote. Because if you don't vote, that means you're not the competent authority for the people. That must be understood. All right. As we start to wrap up, the Act of Algeciras 1906 is the well-settled principles that Moors have to follow the instructions. When Mpac study session is trying to impress upon the Moors that they have to get back to statehood, that's not our abstract. It's not hyperbole. Mpac is simply following the instructions, and all other Moors have to do the same thing. I'll say again, Moors, we have to put things in proper sequential order. What am I saying? And we want to play political chess. Political chess. In like manner. We don't have a constitution in the state. How can we enforce this? You can't enforce this according to the Sultan until you have now ratified through a state in your constitution the treaties, your constitution, declarations, and conventions in order to now enforce this constitution and the obligations of the colonists. You have to have your own boxes checked. Until then, you can't enforce the Constitution. So put it down and pick this up. Your own Moorish Constitution, study international law. Once you've checked the boxes, then you come back and pick this up and you enforce the Constitution. I end with that. Islam.